listener production.
Hey, Chris Spyrou with you. Happy Monday and welcome to The Briefing. The government wants to change the way you access and watch porn, but could your privacy pay the price?
Albo isn't going up to Mr. Pornhub and saying, you must do these things. He's just kind of doing a more like outcome-based approach to this thing. It's like, we need you to figure out a way that's better than what you're doing now to stop kids from accessing this content, but we're going to leave it up to you.
That deep dive is coming up in the second half of this episode. First though, let's get into the headlines with Tara Cassidy. It's Monday, the 15th of September.
Hey Chris, and to you listening. This morning we're starting in the UK, where Prime Minister Keir Starmer says Britain will never surrender its flag to far-right protesters after more than 150,000 people attended an anti-immigration rally in London over the weekend.
This is our country! You should be here standing with us!
It was the country's largest demonstration organised by far-right protesters in decades that at points turned violent, leaving 26 police officers injured, 4 seriously, and at least 24 people that have since been arrested, with authorities expecting more to be made in coming days.
In a statement posted to socials, the British PM said, while people have a right to peaceful protest, the country does not stand for assaults on officers doing their job or for people feeling intimidated because of their background or the colour of their skin. He also went on to say, quote, Britain is a nation proudly built on tolerance, diversity and respect. Our flag represents our diverse country and we will never surrender it to those that use it as a symbol of violence, fear and division.
The Unite the Kingdom March was organised by far-right activist Tommy Robinson, and it featured tributes to late MAGA campaigner Charlie Kirk, and it also included a virtual appearance by tech billionaire Elon Musk, who rallied against the, quote, woke mind virus, called for a change of government in the UK and issued this warning to the crowd.
Whether you choose violence or not, violence is coming to you. You either fight back or you die.
Today, Elon, I think the British public are telling the world that they're ready to fight back.
Good.
Now, in terms of the numbers that were at this protest, London officials stated 110,000 to 150,000 in attendance, but the event's organiser and other supporters say the number was way bigger than that, in the millions. Now, Chris, we were not there, so we are bound by the information that we get from authorities and organisers, but the footage, I don't know if you saw it, it showed an enormous turnout. And I'm not sure about millions, but I think the 150k is likely an understatement.
Yeah, and I think it is worth noting we've seen similar things going on in recent anti-immigration protests in Australia, and our Prime Minister has commented on that. He's commented on the fact that, you know, there are genuine discussions to be had around immigration in Australia and abroad, and people absolutely have the right to protest, but unfortunately it makes it hard to have those discussions when people are trying to make their point while standing side by side with actual far-right activists, or in Australia's case, literal neo-Nazis.
Police involved in the country's largest ever tactical operation as they search for fugitive Dezi Freeman say they can't rule out that he may have escaped interstate. Now, there's currently a $1 million reward being offered for information that leads to the arrest of the accused cop killer, with authorities saying they've received over 1,000 tip-offs to date.
The Sovereign citizens accused of shooting dead 34-year-old Constable Vadim Devat Hoddard and 59-year-old Constable Neil Thompson, and injuring a third officer as they conducted a warrant at a rural Paul property in northeast Victoria over allegations of historical sexual abuse. Freeman was last seen running into bushland, sparking a weeks-long manhunt for him. However, strict travel restrictions in Paul have now been slightly lifted, with residents being allowed to return to the area, except for a nearby national park which remains closed.
And Acting Deputy Commissioner Russell Barrett spoke with media and says that more than 125 specialist police from every Australian state, even New Zealand, have taken part in what's been an enormous search of all the surrounding areas, officers traversing gorges, plantations, caves, rivers and waterfalls to try and find Dezi Freeman.
We consider he may still be in the area. It's a possibility. He may be harboured or he may be dead.
Now, he says if alive, Freeman could even be hiding in an underground bunker, a mine shaft, or being helped by others.
As the coalition continues to clean up the mess left in the wake of Jacinta Nampijinpa Price's dumping from the front bench and a week of infighting, here's some news it's not going to love waking up to. It's recorded its worst primary vote in one poll's history, Tara.
Yeah, according to News Poll, which has been quizzing Aussies on primary votes or which party they'd vote for since 1985, the coalition's crashed to a low of 27%, with leader Susan Lee's approval rating plunging to minus 17%, handing Anthony Albanese his biggest two-party preferred lead since becoming Prime Minister. Now, while the coalition's loss of ground was good news for the PM, it also worked in Pauline Hanson's favour, with One Nation's primary vote jumping almost 4% since the election, now sitting at 10%. And that was a similar lift that we saw in support for the Greens and Independents that are now on 13 and 14% respectively, Chris.
Yeah, and another poll that came out over the weekend as well was the Resolve poll, and it showed fundamentally the same thing. The biggest takeaway for them was that One Nation is now surging, and they're at a record high, according to them, sitting on about 12%. And it comes after the immigration debate and coalition infighting. So Resolve pollster Jim Reid said that the immigration debate is undoubtedly responsible for boosting One Nation's vote. And there's a quote here that he said that actually summarises this whole situation. He said, if you're unhappy with the major parties on the environment, you go to the Greens, hence why we've seen a rise in the Greens' vote. And if you're unhappy about immigration, you go to Pauline, which, I think really summarises kind of what we're witnessing at the moment here, Tara.
Yeah, and just briefly while we're talking about the coalition, we did actually see Susan Lee reshuffle her front bench over the weekend. WA MP Melissa Price took over as coalition spokeswoman for Defence Industry and Personnel, and Tasmania Senator Claire Chandling took over Price's portfolios for cybersecurity and science.
Experts are warning that Australia is now facing a syphilis epidemic, with rates of the STI doubling over the last decade. The same concerning trends being recorded in gonorrhea rates too, with researchers saying many cases are going undetected. According to a new study by UNSW's Kirby Institute, only a mere 16% of Australians aged between 16 and 49 have had an STI test, which is a concerning reality considering the STIs can cause serious health complications if left untreated. However, they're entirely treatable with antibiotics if diagnosed and detected early. So among the things that they can cause, we know that they can cause inflammatory diseases, infertility in women, and even kill newborn babies, with 34 dying from congenital syphilis alone in the past 10 years.
Yeah, and they also said that rates of chlamydia are rife at the moment. And it's not just that. There's another STI that's been doing the rounds and one to look out for. It's called HPV, which a particular strain of is actually the cause of nearly all cervical cancers in women. My colleague in the Listener Newsroom, Laura, actually found this out when looking into this. And she said that there's testing available for women for HPV, but there's no approved HPV screening test for men that you can just go and regularly get. And while we do now have vaccines for it given to young people in schools, they only started in 2007, Chris, and only in 2013 for boys. So we've basically got this generation of sexually active men over the age of 25 that can't go and routinely get checked for this.
And strap yourselves in, because TV's Night of Nights is about to kick off in a few hours' time with Aussie favourites like hit series Severance, The White Lotus, The Penguin, and The Studio, my personal favourite, tipped to win big at this year's Emmy Awards, receiving the most nominations so far, along with others like Adolescence, The Last of Us, and The Bear. The 77th annual primetime event is set to kick off around 10 o'clock for us here in Sydney and Brizzy, Tara, taking place in Los Angeles. And for anyone who doesn't know what the Emmys are, they're pretty much television's equivalent of the Oscars.
Yeah, and our beloved Aussie Kate Blanchett is among those nominated. She's up for the award of Outstanding Lead Actress in the series Disclaimer. However, perhaps the best win of the Emmys, arguably, has already been won, Chris, with the Creative Arts Emmys taking place the week before this particular event, which saw both the US and Aussie Love on the Spectrum series win big. Woohoo! Because I actually love that series. And for those that watch, you'd remember Connor and Tanner, who not only won, but actually got to host part of the awards night.
My friends, love is like a camera. Sometimes you just gotta focus. Now, without further ado, here are the nominees for Outstanding Cinematography, for a reality program.
Oh, I love them. And look, Love on the
Yeah.
Spectrum went on to win 2 Emmys for Outstanding Unstructured Reality Program and Outstanding Casting. And look, if you can't get enough of Love on the Spectrum, I'm going to pop Antoinette's chat with Michael Theo from season 2 of Love on the Spectrum into the show notes. That was an excellent chat late last year. Definitely worth a listen today. Look, that brings our headlines to a close for today. Coming up next is my deep dive, looking into the changes coming to the way we watch porn, why the government's doing it, and what price, if any, our privacy will pay. Have a listen to that deep dive. It's coming up next. Would you be cool with giving a site like Pornhub or OnlyFans your driver's license, credit card, or Face ID just to keep kids safe online? Well, that's pretty much what we're being asked to do by the eSafety Commissioner, with porn websites from March next year needing to take further steps to verify that users in Australia are over the age of 18. But how exactly will these age assurances work? How secure will our personal information be? And can they really keep Aussie kids safe online? Cam Wilson is Crikey's Associate Editor and he joins me now. Cam, welcome back to the briefing. What can you tell us about these minimum age requirements and how they'll affect everyday Australians?
So the eSafety Commissioner, which is Australia's online safety regulator, registered some internet regulations that as part of it will require websites and platforms that serve pornographic adult material, but also other explicit material, even self-harm material as their primary purpose, to take steps to figure out the ages of their users and restrict access only to people who are adults. This is kind of the culmination of a long policy. Like, this has been on the cards for a while. The kind of status quo, as people probably know, if anyone, hypothetically in this audience has ever seen porn on the internet, is that for the most part, websites, if they even do ask your age, will often say, just tell us you're not 18, click this button, or put in your date of birth. But that's now not going to be acceptable. And so this new rule that was actually written by the tech industry and registered by the eSafety Commissioner will mean that these websites and platforms will have to do something more rigorous than that to figure out people's ages and to stop kids from accessing their websites, or they'll face fines of up to $50 million.
And to build on that, the eSafety Commissioner, Julian Grant, has referred to this content as like a broad umbrella of lawful but awful content, is how she's framed it. I'm curious to know, though, how far does this extend? Because there's one thing to put further age requirements on sites like Pornhub or OnlyFans, RedTube, the list goes on and on. You can also find sexually explicit and lawful but awful content on platforms like X. You can find it on Reddit. These are non-porn sites that you can find porn on. Will these requirements extend to those as well?
There's a lot of porn on websites and platforms like Reddit. They're not solely for porn. And so there's a whole bunch of content on there, but they do allow adult content. And these codes say, well, you don't necessarily have to then age restrict all of Reddit, but you've got to be taking steps to restrict that explicit content. So while porn websites, which have a primary purpose of showing this porn, kind of will have to age verify everyone, platforms like Reddit will have to do different things. They'll have to, for example, restrict this adult content, the parts of their website, only to users who've proved their age is 18. It's not all going to be like a one-size-fits-all. And for websites that might have adult content but might not, they can kind of do more nuanced and kind of differentiated approaches based on what actually risky content, according to the eSafety Commissioner, is on there.
When it comes to the porn websites, we're talking here about age assurance and access control measures. We haven't really been given any indication of what specific tech will be rolled out or what that will look like, have we?
No. So the way that this works and the teen social media ban works is that the government has said, hey, tech companies, you're the experts on this. We know that there is emergent technologies. We've actually, run a trial which has put out a report which tested many of these companies and their technologies to kind of see how well they work. We're not going to prescribe exactly what you need to do. Albo isn't going up to Mr. Pornhub and saying, you must do these things. He's just kind of doing a more like outcome-based approach to this thing. It's like, we need you to figure out a way that's better than what you're doing now to stop kids from accessing this content, but we're going to leave it up to you. And so these new technologies range from everything from facial scans. So there are companies that have technologies that will use your webcam to scan your face. And then they'll be like, there's a pretty high chance that you're 18 or younger than 18. They will use AI and kind of data analysis of user accounts to, again, infer your age. So that's like things like, for example, if you've had a Google account for 13 years, you're probably like at least 16 unless you were on very early. And so because of that, we assume that you're probably over 16. So we'll allow you to see adult content on YouTube. So that's how they can use some of the data that they have about you to figure out your age. And then there is literally just the fact that at some points, if it's maybe highly risky content, they think that you are underage and they're saying, if you want to prove otherwise, you need to give us some real proof. They also say you can upload a photo of your passport or driver's license, and their systems will be able to confirm that that is a legitimate driver's license and therefore you are 18. So, these range of technologies from the less onerous all the way up to having to take a photo of your driver's license, which is pretty onerous and might feel invasive. That's at the other end. They've got all these options, and these tech companies are left responsible for deciding what to use. They're just being told, you've got to be doing something.
Cam, have we learnt nothing from all the data hacks and leaks? I mean, the one that's springing to my mind is 2015, Ashley Madison. I'm even thinking about Optus and Medibank. Mm-hmm. Have we learnt nothing?
Have we learnt nothing? You and I have learnt, it seems like we've learnt heaps. Look, let me give you a kind of nuanced approach to this, which is this idea that we unfortunately have to give our data and all kinds of data to all kinds of people. And that's a massive problem. Like anyone who's applied for renting a home knows that you're often asked by, these real estate agents to give, 100 points of ID and all this information. And let's be honest, I don't mean to pass aspersions on our real estate friends, but I'm not sure that they necessarily have the highest standards of cybersecurity in the world. So we have to do this all the time and for all kinds of things. What we're now entering into is an era where that's now kind of more of the requirement for our online life in a way that hasn't been possible before. It doesn't always necessarily have to be something that does risk your privacy. And so, for example, there are systems that they've come up with where you upload your driver's license once to one company that, their work is, figuring out your age, and that's that kind of their job, and they work with all these other tech platforms. So there are these providers, you might say, I've done my face scan, I've done uploaded my driver's license once, you've given it to them, and then that company then will vouch to all these other companies and say, you don't need to see their driver's license, you don't need to scan their face, but you know that we're trustworthy and we can vouch for them that they are 18 years old or over. So in these systems, there are actually ways that technology and commercial partnerships can work that actually, while yes, maybe you've got to upload a passport once and that's more than maybe you've done now, but potentially, that might limit the exposure beyond that. And, if systems like that rolled out to everything, or as a great example, like digital ID, which is something that often I think gets a lot of this really big, reaction to where people think it's 1984. Similarly, like that kind of system, if companies work with government, they could say, well, we need to check if this person is 18. The government knows you're 18. So they say, yep, we can vouch for them, but we don't necessarily need to give you, the company, you, Pornhub, you, the real estate agent, access to 100 points of ID. But as you've rightly pointed out, you do create more opportunities for these kind of breaches and hacks. And I can understand why people are feeling pretty apprehensive about that.
I do want to know, though, Australia is not leading the world in this department when it comes to, age assurances for porn. We have seen it in parts of Europe. We've seen the US do this. And most recently, the UK, they've introduced similar restrictions on porn sites actually just 3 months ago. What impact has that had in the UK so far?
We have seen other countries do this, and UK, as you mentioned, is this example of someone who's been full speed ahead. They introduced similar, not exactly the same ideas to the UK at the end of July. And when they did that, they saw a whole variety of things happen. They saw people getting around these systems. So, for example, using video game characters to trick face scans to actually believe that the video game character that you were showing them was a real person and they're 18. So you can access these, social media sites or whatever that were restricted. You also saw people clearly uncomfortable about the idea of having to put personal information to access adult sites, something that comes with obviously a privacy risk, but obviously a feeling of that things are taboo, that, it's a change and people feel uncomfortable about that. So rather than go to these compliant websites, users decided, well, why don't I just go to one of the other many websites on the internet that doesn't comply with these? And so you saw this surge of traffic towards non-compliant websites who weren't actually age-checking users when this came in. But you could also probably imagine that the companies and websites that are not compliant with this law probably aren't the best actors in this space. And so there is concern that whenever you on the internet create more restrictions about something, you might end up encouraging people to actually go to worse places in the end because some other people don't comply, and it's very easy to find alternatives.
Yeah, and look, speaking of harms and things like that, we do know that there is an overwhelming amount of evidence to show that porn use among young kids and teens is harmful. Everything from distorting understandings of sex, relationships, consent, to increasing anxiety and body image issues. But do you think age verification is the solution here? Because critics of government-mandated age checks typically argue that they unfairly inconvenience adults, like you've mentioned there, having to upload your passport or whatever, or show your face to a porn site or a verification site, and that more broadly they are band-aids to bigger issues that should be dealt with by things like further education and tougher parenting.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I would say, like in your question, you said there are negative effects of porn. Yes, there are, but also, many sex educators believe that porn can be a part of it, sex education, and also just something that people do for fun. And I think, let's be real, most teens, almost all of them, are accessing sexually explicit material before they turn 18 by choice. But what I think most people would agree on is that there is some kind of minimum age that we think culturally people shouldn't be able to see this stuff. And also an uncomfortable part of modern online life is that many young children are exposed to porn unintentionally. They're not seeking it out. They are being shown it, and platforms and websites aren't actually doing enough to stop that from happening because, the unintentional exposure to this stuff, that is, I think where you kind of see the harm. Let me put it this way. I think for a lot of the internet, the time that the internet's been around, the problem of figuring out people's ages and protecting people from seeing content that we think young people shouldn't see has kind of been put in the too hard basket. Now with advances in technology, now with changes, I think, in public opinion that have come along with that, we're now saying you guys actually need to be doing more. You need to be figuring out people's ages. You need to be customizing what they see based on their age, so maybe they don't get exposed to stuff that they shouldn't be before. Look, I'm a journalist. I'm not going to tell you what to think. All I know is that the system before age verification has had a lot of harm towards young people, but also the system that we're coming into presents a lot of risks as well. We need to be taking those risks carefully. We need to be thinking about how age verification, if it doesn't work as it intended, or if it does work as intended, what are the effects, and not just the good effects, but what are the unintended consequences that maybe actually do have harm as well.
Cam Wilson, thanks for joining us again on The Briefing.
Good to be here.
That was Crikey's associate editor speaking with me there. And that is it for this episode of The Briefing. If you enjoyed it, be sure to share it with a mate who might enjoy it too. And while you're there, leave us a rate and review. I'm Spyrou. Catch you next time.